Right, we are currently waiting on one member, so we are going to bypass introductions, election of officers, and the approval of the agenda and jump into our presentation number 4, which is going to be a presentation on the Red Rock Corridor revisioning and scope of work.
Thank you, Chair and Red Rock Corridor Commission members. My name is Lissa Leitner, and I am the Planning Director for Washington County. We're going to start just with a couple very high-level overview slides of a little bit of Red Rock history, and then I have a guest here, Will Schroer from East Metro Strong, who will come and help us talk through a potential scope of work. So if folks recall, or some of you recall, because some of you are new and weren't here at our last meeting, there was a very robust, probably an hour-long easily discussion about doing a potential revisioning in this corridor. Obviously, a lot has changed since the last study was done. And so there was the appetite to do this work. And so the commission at that time directed our staff to work on a scope of work to bring back to you and to discuss. So that is the intent today. But for a little bit of background, of course, Red Rock Corridor is approximately 20-mile transit corridor between St. Paul and Hastings, of course, with further connections, particularly in St. Paul to other destinations via transit. And the latest study had recommended highway bus rapid transit, high frequency, both directions, and high amenity stations. The slide here just shows what a potential station could look like. This was a shift. For a long time, the corridor was either commuter rail or express buses, but commuter rail, which was bringing mostly residents into the downtown to work and back again. And there was a large shift to basically show via outreach, really, with businesses, residents, is that this corridor, there was a lot of need for the two-way travel of getting both, of course, still residents from this corridor to the downtowns to work, but also to get workers to jobs in this corridor, as well as, to education, medical, other daily destinations. And so there was a shift in the 2014 timeline away from the one-way destination into the downtowns to that both direction all-day service, which is where highway bus rapid transit came in and commuter rail was off the table. In 2017, an implementation plan was done to basically look at how we're actually going to implement this, and that had a variety of steps. In the near term, of course, it was working with Metro Transit to increase local and express bus service, an attempt to implement a 30-minute all-day route. There's been multiple legislative requests to try to do that. We are still attempting to do that. Of course, both with COVID as well as the driver shortage, there has not been success in doing that. Long term, some of this had bled into near term, but it is working with the cities primarily to increase development around potential stations. We know that would increase transit ridership. And then hopefully as comp plans and local plans develop, that we could look at updated models. So what we want to discuss today, and Will Schroer with East Metro Strong, he'll provide a little bit of background about who he is, what East Metro Strong is, but they're a great partner in the East Metro, and really looking at, based on what the conversation was last meeting, is contracting basically with East Metro Strong, and work with stakeholders basically on two main buckets. Work with stakeholders to understand and describe how new transportation needs what new transportation needs are in the Red Rock Corridor, and work with stakeholders to develop a refreshed vision for transit in this corridor. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Will, but I'll pause here since we had another commissioner join us. Commissioner, we jumped to item number 4 in the agenda since it was an information item.
Thanks, Lissa. And any questions for Lissa before I go?
I can stand up here in case.
Okay, all right. Thanks. My name is Will Schroer. I'm the Executive Director of East Metro Strong. And as Lissa said, I was here in the fall and really enjoyed that lengthy conversation. Lengthy because I think there was a lot of ground to cover and a lot of questions were raised. And as Lissa suggested, out of that came a request from the commission if we were going to take a new look at this corridor, given all the changes that have happened since 2017, what would the first steps to that look like? And so I worked with Washington County staff to develop the scope of work that's in your packet. And as Lissa said here, really two buckets. So the first, and to my mind, the more important one, is to work with stakeholders and other experts to understand what the current needs in the corridor are, how those maybe have changed since 2017, how maybe they're likely to change going forward, right? We're in a new trajectory in many ways. And then once with that understanding in place, then we would move to task two, which is to develop a refreshed vision for transit in this corridor. What task two would not do is develop very specific plans or proposals, but rather to start with, all right, here are the needs in this corridor in 2023 and probably in the next 10 years. What would probably be the best way to help meet? No one corridor is going to meet all the needs, but the best way to help meet those needs and go from there.
Chair and Commissioners, I think the only thing to add is, based on the last conversation, there was fairly clear direction to make sure that this scope doesn't look at a prescribed mode, a prescribed type of transportation, but to make sure we're looking and thinking outside the box because of how much not only have travel patterns changed, demographics have shifted, technology has changed. There's multiple new types of transportation options, both in the region as well as in the country. But to make sure that we are really opening up and trying to be as creative as possible to not kind of constrain ourselves to the same way of thinking that we have before. Now, that might lead to a similar outcome of where we are today, we don't know. But hopefully the scope provides at least the flexibility to be able to achieve some of those things. So what we're looking for today is direction on, there is a draft scope of work in the packet, pages 10, 11, and 12. And so basically to get your general thoughts, if you want to change, add, and then we would, via the budget action later, work with Will to both utilize some of East Metro Strong resources as well as contract out via East Metro Strong to conduct this work and get started. So with that, we can open it up to discussion if there is any.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any comments they want to talk about?
I can start us off, Madam Chair. So, it's been about 6 years since I've been on the commission, and so much has changed on it. But one thing that has not changed is the legislature's failure to fund transit at a way that we can, build ridership on it. And I think that plays a major role in this commission. It always has. And so I think one item that we won't know for a little bit, right? I mean, we'll start to know a little bit in April. We may know a little more obviously by May. But I think, getting some of this stuff going now is a good idea and having the conversations. I guess one of the things that I would like to see, and I don't know what it exactly looks like as a document, but we have some, I don't even know what the adjectives, it's not a conflict, it's not a struggle, but questions that need to be answered, both short-term and midterm and long-term, right? So I think, starting long-term, Dakota County, Hastings, not being in the transit taxing district, Dakota wanting to keep the door open when that happens, they want to be part of the discussion. So I get all that, and then I think long-term of the development especially along this corridor, and if Councilmember Kambata, could provide some insight onto the rate, and I believe it's happening very soon, of the development down off of 61 and 19, commonly known as the shops at Cottage Grove. And to see the timeline on when that develops. We've seen some development shift in Cottage Grove, specifically in this area. There are developments here in St. Paul Park that will be adding density. There's density around the Newport Transit Center, hopefully in the next year. So there's just, again, some short-term, midterm, long-term questions that I hope maybe this process will flush out a little bit. And I think there's some steps to take a look at in that time. And so I might have more comments as we go along, but I guess that's kind of my initial reaction is, Metro Transit doesn't really have a crystal ball. Nobody does at when ridership will change, but the one thing I would like, and maybe we could talk about it later on in the agenda, but I think it's very important for Washington County, but for South Washington County specifically, to be at the table when that transit discussion starts back up. Maybe express bus routes are not the best thing anymore. Maybe it is something about regular route bus service. And for Newport, I've often said this, is I think they need their own routes. They need their own routes out of Newport to St. Paul to Minneapolis. They don't need the Cottage Grove complexity to add on to the drive. Met Council needs to be at the table with that with us. I would like to see a letter sent maybe from the commission, is an idea that I had, to say, hey, when these discussions start up, we would like to be notified and be part of those discussions. So.
Yeah, I would have to agree with Chair Bingham. It's an ongoing process at the Met Council as far as projections and ridership, and they're always looking and they're always trying to find that crystal ball, but obviously we just don't know. But with the changes you mentioned, like technology and everything else, and so many people working a modified schedule, they work from home certain days or they work from home certain times, or things have really changed. And I do think that an all-day bus service might be the way to go to get ridership back up and to offer more availability to folks out there that want to use the bus system. I know I, for one, always took the bus, and I can't anymore because it doesn't fit in with the hours that I do work now downtown, because it's long strike, but anyway, it's not working out for me. So having an all-day bus service would be ideal and would definitely bring up ridership. Another concern that I've heard here in town is building up. There's a development we're looking at down towards the river there on Block 89. It's about 13 acres, and we're looking at putting in 5 apartment buildings and 2-story apartment buildings that would be about 147 units total. And so the question was brought up, well, we used to have that circulator bus that would bring you to the transit station or something in Newport and catch up with an express bus or something else. So I'm thinking, and I think about the development in Cottage Grove in their industrial park, and also building up the different apartment buildings that they have and the more senior living that they have. And I know they have one DART circulator bus now, but that might be something that would help and tie into this too, if we had an all-day bus service that how do we get to those stations to pick up too? Those connectors, that last mile, or get home, you can get to and from that. How do you get to and from that pickup area? So that's, something I want to keep an eye on too. But I definitely am glad that we're still meeting and keeping this going, because it's been a long time coming, and COVID threw a wrench in everything, and now everybody is wondering what's next. And so, but, I see traffic picking up, and I see the downtown traffic picking up a little bit. So they're out there, and I see people that I used to ride the bus with walk into a parking lot to pick up their car, because obviously it's not working for them anymore. So I'd like to see it continue. And I'd like to see Hastings a part of it, because back in the day, we saw an awful lot of people come from Hastings to the Cottage Grove Park and Ride to then continue on. And they're growing leaps and bounds as well. So getting them connected to us and to this project is, I think, super important.
I think that, you just talked a little bit about it, but we're probably a year and a half, 2 years and a half maybe out from about 500 new residences being built, single family, not much, but apartments, senior living. Senior living seems to be a ticket item for Hastings. And, myself as a senior, I would appreciate if we had, bus service more on a regular basis. I still, listen to folks that say, yep, we used to drive up to Cottage Grove, get on the bus, then COVID hit, and, they're working from home sometimes, and other times it's like they're driving into the city, but it's at different times of the day, and they just drive. And if we could come up with a process that said, yep, this is a regular route, and it will start from point A and go all the way to point B, but we're looking at an additional population growth potentially in Hastings, and we have to provide avenues for transportation because it just gets, the highways are getting more clogged, it's slower traffic. If you're driving at certain times of the day, it's really congested right out here. And, we have to try and alleviate that somehow. So I think this is a good step to move forward. But we have to do the research to find the findings and see where we're going. Thank you.
I'll just, I'll just kind of mention in the case of Newport, one of the things we're looking to do ourselves is to re-envision our own commercial corridors, areas along 61, so 7th Avenue and also Hastings. And I think, so this is something that I'll be thinking about as I'm thinking about that as well. And we know that we've had some redevelopment, but we've had some areas that haven't. And I think this is, but I think, and so our transit district is kind of one of the pieces that's kind of, we've struggled with over time. I think we're still committed to it, but it's just understanding what it is how this syncs up. I mean, we're obviously at the transit site itself, we're looking at apartments there, potentially there's been some other developers in close proximity there to that as well. So, I mean, and overall, just as our city, we might be embarking on probably the biggest residential development, a second wave that we so I think we could I've had conversation with our city administrator, Joe Hatch, who's out in the audience, but it's like we could realistically reach 5,000 people by 2030, which for a town that had been stagnant for decades, I think that's realistic. So I think a lot is changing in our town, but, and it's, how it fits is the big piece, and I think, I've mentioned the last meeting too, is we're also kind of a east-west area too, and think of how that Newport train station, which sits there in a very sad kind of existence right now with sad events of the last couple of days too, but it's just how that, there's a lot of potential there at that crossroads, and it's just how we find it. But I mean, I think in the meantime, we're going to keep developing in a way that is compatible with transit-oriented, because I think it is, we had the conversation even earlier, but it's good development, whether we get it there or not, but it could lead to something more over time as some of the industrial area. We have a lot of industrial land between the transit station and the river too, that we've envisioned, some of the grand plans of the commuter rail era. We're envisioning crazy things there, but that's completely on the back burner. But it could, if this does take root, it could keep growing too. So we're not out of space. I think a lot of people think Newport's done growing, and it's just we have lots of land that can be repurposed. So I think that's kind of where we're at. But
You looking at me?
Yeah, anything?
Well, I was at the last meeting when we put this together, the scope of work, and I was very transparent and said we need to move forward on this plan. But I have several concerns that I think we should address in this process. And it isn't simply about getting more money for funding for transit. I want to know where that money is going and how it's being spent. I think, I am not sure that, and please forgive me, but our relationship with the Met Council has not always been transparent
Correct.
both ways.
Correct?
And so that's an issue for Ramsey County. The other is, I agree, we need probably to, and including in the city of St. Paul, we don't need express buses. We need more local service. We were slashed very badly. But it's not just saying we're gonna put back the lines, it's, what about the people whose jobs don't lend themselves to working from home? And we have a lot of those folks. And how do they get around? So there has to be connectivity. I don't even know if the routes we got are the ones that work the best,
Right?
because it's not just the ones that go through here, but how do they connect with St. Paul and everything as you move? Those are the questions I have. So I am not going to, I've already gotten phone calls, I'm going to lunch with people, because everybody wants more transit. I am being a real stickler about saying, I'm not jumping on that bandwagon until I know all the pieces. How are we looking at this? The other thing, Will, and nobody has a crystal ball, but we're gonna have to make assumptions. And so far, what I hear from the Met Council is the assumption, or anybody else, because it's like everybody keeps parroting. And that is, well, nobody's going back to work 5 days a week. And nobody is going to, we don't need, the assumptions are no longer valid. We even have formulas with the FDA that don't make sense anymore. We're not fighting those. We're really adhering to them, and they don't make sense for us. So those are the issues that I think we need to list for discussion. And I like to see what people's thinking is, because we get so parochial, One of the reasons why I support the Red Rock Corridor is because I don't want to be St. Paul centric. I think it's a regional issue. And then there needs to be equity between the East Metro area and the West Metro area. We don't have that now. And that's another issue with financing transit. So what if they put in $1 billion and 90% of it goes to the West Metro area? That still leaves you short. Those are the issues that I'm sort of concerned. I could keep on rattling things that come into my head, but in general, it's how do we take a fresh look at all this stuff? Not just this route, but how it connects with everything else.
A couple follow-up things. One, I'm a big proponent of the Gold Line because and then Commissioner White had this idea, and I still push it at every time there is a workshop on the Gold Line, is that there should be a circulator between the Tamarack stop and the Newport station so that my people in the southern part can connect to Gold Line that way and go on. Is this, and I believe that side of it will help build ridership, not only for the Gold Line, but for Red Rock. But if my memory is right, between the original analysis, it was, and the updated one, it was about 5-6 years. And now we're about 7 years from that. Is this kind of where we're heading, or is this kind of what you're going to do, a modified alternatives analysis where maybe this is something that we start, with circulator service and regular route and then build up on this? I mean, something along those lines. Is that kind of where you're heading, to piggyback off of what Commissioner Ortega is saying about thinking, more of the regional side of it and not just, the specific corridors?
Chair, if I may, thank you. Commissioner Bigham and the whole commission, I'm going to actually respond to both Commissioner Ortega and Commissioner Bigham at the same time, because you're both raising larger issues, and absolutely, I see this document lifting up those issues and being transparent about them. And I think that's actually an advantage of doing this, because in a more narrow sort of planning study, maybe you're not going to raise some of these issues, right? Because, well, we're just looking at this corridor, right? But when we're talking about a vision for how are we going to serve South Washington County and Hastings and connect it to the west of the region, those bigger questions are absolutely appropriate. the process that I see for that happening is, starts with, as I said, that task one, a lot of conversations with stakeholders, including yourselves. So I guarantee you that those views will be reflected, in part because you have them and you're important stakeholders. You're also not the only people that have them. I expect to hear those views from a lot of people. So I think that that's going to be how I see this going forward, is some of those more macro questions. And then to Commissioner Bigham's, like, more detailed, will you be able to get in this refreshed vision? Is the refreshed vision going to suggest you have to be able to connect from Newport up to Tamarack? I think so. Now, again, we're not going to develop the plans for how to do that in this higher level document, but that's part of, to my mind, a vision. It says for people in South Washington County to get up to all those destinations, whatever we do in this corridor has to connect them to that other big investment. That just makes sense. So not to prejudge the results of this, but I would be shocked if that wasn't one of the places where this ended up.
Chair and Commissioners, I think the last thing I'll add is one of the big goals is to get ourselves outside of the linear thinking, figuratively and literally,
Right.
but on the 61 corridor. All the engagement we've done in the decade I've worked for Washington County in this corridor has been, there's so much happening off 61 in fixed route transit, which is what we're talking about, whether it's a train or any sort of bus, doesn't get people to every place they need to go, or to a lot of the jobs, particularly industrial jobs, throughout this corridor. And there are so many other options now that have come to the surface that are not what we in the business call fixed route transit, microtransit, even car share. St. Paul piloting electric vehicle car share. There are so many things that also exist that are not your typical transit. And that's what we're potentially hoping to uncover, that some of those solutions that are maybe a mix and match that might come out of this. And so I want to encourage you all to potentially start thinking that way too. And part of this process will help educate, inform, but uncover where some of these needs are.
Great.
Madam Chair?
Yeah, please.
When we look at those modes, and that's all fine, the car sharing is really not new. We've been doing that in St. Paul for a long time. My thing is, when I have folks that need jobs, one of the things about the gold line is, when we looked, is the amount of employment need in Woodbury is matched by our need to get people employed. And those numbers all made sense, right? The same thing applies to this, because if you're growing and eventually you're gonna need more people to come and work. How do we get there? How do I, from St. Paul, get to a job along 61? And for me, the ride share does not answer that. I mean, and we could list those are like niche transit things, but it doesn't answer the volume of folks. I'm just looking at the need that we're gonna be having in Ramsey County, and the fact that the affordability of cars are almost out the window. I'm trying to, in my mind, figure out how do we move this? And it isn't gonna be something like car share. I think it's part of the solution, just like Metro Mobility is. But when you have seniors that need to get to health appointments or volunteer somewhere, or kids for recreation in Ramsey County, it isn't a race thing anymore. Poor people do not use our parks. They can't get there. It has nothing to do with race. It has to do, people that can't afford, how do they get to our parks? They can't. There's just no bus service. Those are the kind of things I'm thinking about.
All right.
Chair, Commissioners, we'll take this feedback and work with Will, and the intent would be then by the April meeting, which is the next one on the books, to have somebody under contract and kind of have some work underway, and then maybe have the format of that meeting kind of more of a facilitated, pointed discussion to kind of further flesh out this work and what the plans are to conduct it over the next year or so.
Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. With that, I think we'll move back to the beginning of our agenda, which is introductions. Do we want to start at the end there and work our way down? We do have a couple new people on.
Rafael Ortega, Ramsey County Commissioner, District 5.
Okay.
Marvin Taylor, Newport City Council.
Carla Bigham, Washington County Commissioner, District 4.
And I'm Sandy Dingle, and I'm the mayor here in St. Paul Park.
And Dave Pemble, I'm counsel at large in Hastings.
All right. Next, we have the election of officers, and we need to, per our bylaws, elect a chair and a vice chair every year. So I would like to make a motion to elect Carla Bingham as our chair. This will be a one-year term, or until their successors are elected. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Are there any questions or concerns about that? All in favor of that motion, say aye. Aye. That motion is approved. So next, we need to appoint a vice chair. Do I have a motion?
Can I nominate Sandy Dingle for vice chair?
All right.
I
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any comments, complaints, questions, or concerns? All in favor of that motion, say aye. Aye. All right, that motion is approved as well. So now that we have a new chair, I'm going to turn it over to Carla Bingham to take over the meeting.
Thank you. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve today's agenda?
So move.
I'll second.
It's been a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that is approved. We had number 4, the presentation. We'll move to number 5, which is approval of the October minutes. Is there any corrections or edits to them before seeking a motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay, there's been a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And there's a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. And the next one is recognition of outgoing members from the commission. And that is for former Washington County Commissioner Wayne Johnson and former Hastings City Council member Mark Vaughn. There is a wonderful resolution there in the packet honoring them, and would be looking to have a motion to approve the recognition of the resolution, and then they will be forwarded a nice copy.
So move.
There's a motion,
And I'll second that.
a second. Any discussion?
No, I just want to thank them both for their time. I think they both served the commission well, and we do appreciate that, so thank you.
Any other comment? All right, with that, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. Number 7 is the Red Rock Corridor Commission Insurance Renewal, and I'll turn that one over to Alyssa.
Chair, Commissioners, thank you. Just a little bit of background here. This is an annual renewal. And as a reminder, a handful of years ago, the commission did direct staff that if there was less than a 10% change in the cost of insurance, then staff could sign off and approve that. So you don't see the actual cost of insurance. It's, of course, baked into the work plan, but that is no longer an action item. I think it changed by $3 or something close to that. So that was under the 10% mark. But there are 2 actions in front of you today. One, so the commission is asked every year whether or not to waive the statutory tort liability limits. And working with our risk managers at the county, the recommendation is to approve that the statutory tort liability limits to not be waived. In a discussion similar to the cost of insurance, our risk managers also suggested to us, the section action in front of you today is basically to direct staff to have that same power, is to continually give staff the authority to sign that, check that box and sign that every year, unless with our risk managers if they are basically saying that they think the direction should be different. So those are the two separate actions first one is to do that action yourself as the commission. Second action is to then, years forward, giving staff the power to basically take that action without taking it to the commission. So I can stand, in the packet is the form for that liability coverage. Any questions if there are any?
Madam Chair?
Yep.
I would move that we approve that the statutory tort liability limits not be waived, and that we approve the automatic renewal of the decision not to waive the statutory tort liability limits without the need for new board action unless the policy changes in nature.
All right, there's been a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. All right, then the next one is the signature of the joint powers agreement. That is also Lissa.
Chair and Commissioners, in routine housekeeping, our staff was unable to locate the actual signed version of the most current joint powers agreement. So we consulted with our county attorney, and they basically stated it's recorded in the minutes that the action occurred. So we know it happened, and so we just need a signature on the document. And so this, of course, was, I'm sure, our staff not scanning in. Of course, back in 2018, we were working under no DocuSign, et cetera. So funnily enough, I actually think it was Commissioner Bingham who was chair at the time, so we will just have you re-sign the document, same person. But that is the action in front of you today, is approve the resolution to re-sign the existing joint powers agreement.
Any questions?
So that's why we brought you back?
Yeah. To sign it, that was the whole point.
Did you take it with you?
I did not take it with me. I did not take it with me.
I've seen your house, it's very clean, just chuck it, if you don't need it, throw it out. Or when in doubt, throw it out. Madam Chair, I would make a motion that we do approve that resolution to re-sign the existing joint powers agreement.
Is there a second?
Second.
And there's a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. We have now the 2023 work plan and budget. That's Lissa, sorry.
Chair and Commissioners, annually, we approve a work plan and budget. Typically, this is done at the last meeting for the previous year, but because of the unknown of this scope of work, we wanted to wait until this meeting, so we knew to make sure we were aligning the budget item and the scope. And so what you see in front of you is primarily the same as every year, with the addition of this revisioning process. So the proposed budget for 2023 is $66,500. It will be covered 100% by existing fund balance. Throughout the years, there's been fund balance for both Ramsey and Washington County's previous contributions. So we will draw from that. And you will see that the work plan detailed in front of you. I am going to flip to page 37 in the packet that details out the budget. You can see the general corridor administration. That number is much higher this year because of that revisioning. We're budgeting $50,000 to work with Will and contract out some of those services. The corridor insurance is in there. We typically budget $1,000 for any sort of kind of outreach mailings, that sort of thing, as well as any events, tours, advertising. A lot of times that budget goes unused, but we think it's prudent, particularly, this year when we're conducting a study, to have that available to us. And then the public involvement, website hosting does cost us around $2,000 every year. And then communication service, same thing. We have not, in years past, we've contracted with professional communication consultants if there was that need. Once again, felt like it made some sense, particularly since there was fund balance, to budget for that in case it's needed. As of right now, we're not intending to contract with anybody, but given what the commission is doing this year, we thought it made some sense to keep that dollar in there. And then you'll see the revenue sources there is 100% coming from the fund balance. And with that, I can stand for any questions if there are any.
Any questions? Okay, with that, I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Move to approve, right, Rafael? Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That passes. The next item is communications update. And we probably should also have her introduce herself so that the commission is aware.
I will do a quick Andrea is a new, Rame is a new planner on the team, and so she's going to be the staff lead for the Red Rock Corridor Commission. She's worked for the county for about a month.
Yes.
She was a clerk for another organization for about 3 years, so when I handed her this packet to put together, she knew what to do. But she wanted to watch me do the meeting, and she was going to take this item, but in the future, she'll be taking many of the items, so go ahead, Andrea.
Yes, thank you for the introduction. This is a pretty quick communications update for you. I will aim to keep our social medias active by posting transit news a couple times a month to keep things popping up on people's pages. And as a reminder of the Facebook following numbers, we have 403 likes and 415 people follow the Facebook page. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions? Okay. And that is just for information. We don't need any approval. We appreciate that. Thank you very much and welcome.
Thank you.
Anyway. The next item is other, and then there's commissioner reports. Anybody have anything to add? I believe Commissioner Ortega has an exciting announcement about Gold Line.
Oh, the FDA
Yes.
approved. We were approved by the FDA.
Chair and Commissioners, yes, the federal, the full funding grant agreement, which will commit approximately $239 million for Gold Line, is in its last phase, which is congressional review, which means it is as good as signed, hopefully actually executed with DocuSign in particular by the end of this month. So a huge step forward over a decade in the making.
Yeah, and Commissioner Ortega's been there every step of the way, as has Lissa. So it's a big deal for the East Metro, and really appreciate your leadership on all that. It's only going to make us bigger, better, stronger. So, any other comments?
You know, I just want
Oh,
to
yep.
say, this is about the fourth meeting that's, including my own board meeting, where people said, don't you have something to announce? And I'm thinking, what the hell? You know, I always assumed in the last couple of years we were going to get it, at least in the last 2 years. It's just a matter of,
Yeah.
going through the procedures,
Yeah.
dealing with the bumps in the road. So it sort of lost its fanfare for me personally, because I've done this a couple of times already. But yeah, it's thing. It's over 10 years of working on this, going back to the very beginning when we had to gain support. There were a lot of folks that didn't want it, but
Kept persevering. That's awesome. Any other updates? Okay, it sounds like our next meeting is April 27th. We'll have some additional information based on the feedback from today. So with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And we are adjourned.